Today we're gonna be building an esports gaming PC for around $400. Now you can obviously come up with many variations of a gaming PC within this budget range, but the reason why I chose to build this kind of computer is that I wanted to have the highest possible FPS in shooters on low settings at 1080p resolution. As you guys know, FPS games mostly rely on CPU. You can have a nice GPU as well, but that will barely do us any favors if we're trying to build the best esports gaming PC for $400. Speaking of which, this whole build started with a bit of a story. My neighbor actually sold me his computer that he didn't need anymore, and I found myself in a situation where I had a lot of secondhand parts that I wanted to sell. And when it comes to building PCs, I usually build with mostly new parts. I'm not a fan of used parts, they are really expensive in my country, and most of the times I'm able to order new parts from international stores for nearly the same price as I can get them secondhand locally. And with that in mind, my neighbor still gave me an amazing deal that I couldn't refuse. So what did I actually buy from my neighbor? Well, pretty much a whole PC without a GPU and a CPU. In this particular build, however, we are gonna be reusing just the case and the fans. I have different plans for the other parts, so I'm gonna keep them for a later video. For the motherboard and CPU combo, I went with an i3-14100F and H610 MHP from Biostar, a really budget but a pretty capable modern combo. i3-14100F is known for its amazing performance in games, and since I wanted to save money on the motherboard, I went with the cheapest available option, which is more than enough for what we're gonna be pairing it with. For the cooler, I went with DeepCool AG200, a quite capable 92mm cooler with 2 heat pipes. As for the RAM, I went with a bit of a premium option, a 16GB kit from G.Skill at 3200MHz with really good timings. For the storage, I went with a 512GB SATA SSD. We'll be powering the system with this DeepCool DE600, which should be more than enough for a PC like this. And of course, the GPU, RX 6600. I'm usually not a big fan of AMD GPUs, but in this particular case, it was the best available option. Here's the summary of the parts. I had to remove one of the case fans, by the way, because it was making a lot of noise and cleaning it didn't really resolve the issue. But all in all, I think we ended up with a pretty decent PC. So, without any further ado, let's head over to the benchmarks and see how this PC performs in games. Let's begin with Valorant. We are gonna be testing this game on low settings at native 1080p resolution. Now, most players prefer to have high FPS with the best possible response time, which is why I decided to go for these settings. Better graphics and higher resolution is great, but it's not something that FPS players are looking for in these games. Anyhow, in this deathmatch we're getting upwards of 350 FPS with no stutters whatsoever. The gameplay is as smooth as it can be, and it's honestly a pure enjoyment to be able to play your favorite FPS game on a high refresh rate monitor at 350 plus FPS. Fortnite. I went with low settings here as well and jumped straight into a BR since that's what most people play here. Now, if you're a Fortnite player, you would know that frame drops are pretty common here, which was no exception for us, but thankfully, the game usually stabilizes itself once you play it for a few minutes. In the air, we had around 150 FPS, which is common for games like this, but on the ground, it went into mid-200s, and frame drops became less and less frequent as we continued playing the game. Overall, I had a pretty good gaming experience. The stutters were there, but they weren't really noticeable because of our high FPS. In the end, we achieved around 230 FPS. Counter-Strike 2. Low settings at native 1080p resolution. Unlike Fortnite, this game has a much more stable frame rate and stutters are usually very rare here. As such, in this 10-minute deathmatch, I didn't see a single stutter and the gameplay was as smooth as it could have been. The FPS stayed above 200 at all times and it was a great gaming experience from start to finish. Overall, we averaged around 240 FPS. PUBG will be our last game for today's benchmarks. I went with the low settings tier 2 since the purpose of this PC is to be able to deliver high FPS on low settings in every shooter. In this BR, the FPS stayed above 200 at all times, and sometimes it even went into low 300s. A pretty solid performance overall. Now, if I said that I didn't see a single stutter at all, I would be lying, but none of those stutters were noticeable in the actual gameplay. Regardless of what was showing on the frame graph, the game was still perfectly smooth from start to finish. Pretty much what we saw in Fortnite, except that the frame time was a bit more stable here. All in all, my overall experience was pretty good. I honestly wanted to show you guys more benchmarks, but I'm just extremely limited on time, so I just stuck with whatever was popular here. I'm gonna be showing you guys a lot more content in the nearest future, but for now, this is all I have to offer. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.